How to Draw Conclusions with Lucas Albrecht. Give it up for Lucas.
Hello. How's it going, y'all? All right, let's get going. I'd like to look at something together. It's something I spent the past year looking at, trying to figure it out. It's in this panel, but it's not the whole panel. And it's not just in this panel. It's kind of a reoccurring thing that shows up in thousands of comics. And though it's always popping up, it never sticks out. It's so woven in the graphic vernacular that maybe most wouldn't notice or care just how weird it is. But I've been thinking about comics my whole life. My earliest literary diet was a mix of my uncle's American superhero collection and my dad's Belgian almanacs. And the TV I watched was dominated by animated adaptations of Japanese manga. And then I drew it all. These formal ideas forged my visual literacy, teaching me how to read and think while also setting up a lifelong relationship. As I've grown up, my taste has diversified and intensified. Sorry to say, but I love comics as a form and as a medium. And in this image, sunken into the blacks of the background, I recognize something I'm captivated by. It's a replicable, idiosyncratic brushing strategy. It's a background element that doesn't just do background things. It's lurking, bubbling ink, and every time I think I know what I'm looking at, another angle presents itself. I kind of resists any box I try to push it into. What is it doing and why does it keep showing up? What role does it play in telling a story or drawing a panel? How does it behave? What can it tell us about the world that created comics and the world that comics create? There are so many questions in whatever inkwell those marks come from, a deliberate negotiation of perhaps everything comics can do. And maybe more. I know I see more. I see an American story about power. If interrogated enough, I wonder what these marks could confess to. This may be a good time to officially introduce you to the mark that I'm talking about. It's called the Kirby Krackle. And this example is one of many over the past 80-some years. It first started appearing in comic books by Jack Kirby, though we can't give him all the credit. For the larger part of mainstream American comics history, comics have been made in something like a production line, with writers, pencilers, inkers, letterers, and colorists. Sip break. Kirby was, however, a pioneer. He was one of the medium's major innovators and one of its most prolific and influential creators. He was born over 100 years ago and has been gone for almost 30, but more on him later. For a brief history, proto-crackles started popping up as early as the 1940s in stories about multidimensional fascists. Then, more mature crackles graduated to wholesome tales of sci-fi optimism, until and retiring by Kirby's hand under the weight of impending apocalypse in his last book. Only the crackle didn't go away when Kirby stopped drawing. It's one of the many reasons I find the crackle so captivating. This little graphic artifact has made its way into various characters in many stories by all kinds of artists put out by different publishers. It even made its on-screen animated debut recently. Which is weird because of how comic booky it seems to me. It's an ink-based phenomenon. It's so idiosyncratic, but not bound to much beyond the superhero genre. It looks like it would be a graphic meme, but it has stuck around too long to be tied to an era. It seems to want to describe a certain kind of space, only it's flattening, and inconsistent with what it kind of seems to represent. It's elusive and it's slippery. Only the Kirby Krackle does that while being immediately recognizable and never out of place. So in my search for meaning, I started with comics' own theoretical tools. And I think the simplest way to define it is as its own proprietary kind of black spotting. The fill-in of areas with black ink to direct attention and composition. Only that doesn't help us explain why it's used and when it's forgotten when it isn't. Another way to define it would be as emanata, explained by Mort Walker's seminal 1980 text Lexicon of Comicana as unrealistic pictorial elements emanating from a character symbolizing something about that character, such as sweat drops from anxiety or a question mark for confusion. However, to be emanata, it would need to communicate something directly about the characters and things it enshrouds, but it doesn't. Though it would be difficult to say what it is that the Krackle evokes, it's obviously evocative. Okay, let's revisit the most important hand in its creation, Jack Kirby. He was purposeful in connecting to the public and writing stories that sold. He has created characters that are still dominating popular culture, like Captain America, Thor, and Black Panther, yet his name is rarely brought up outside of comic books fandom. He wrote new legends and gave us new gods, American gods, who instead of wearing halos were enshrouded in a crackling aura. Jack Kirby was born in New York City during World War I. He had a violent upbringing and in the New York Lower East Side tenement buildings, which felt like a lifelong boot camp preparing him for his own eventual deployment. Kirby landed on Omaha Beach 2.5 months after D-Day. Instead of getting a propaganda job like most of his fellow comic book artists, he would be made a scout, being sent ahead of the infantry to map out areas still untrodden by the Allies. War is both a backdrop in the lives of Golden Era comic book creators and a pertinent topic for a populist medium. When the U.S. dropped an atomic bomb in Hiroshima in 1945, President Harry Truman described it as the harnessing of the basic power of the universe. The public at the time was ill-prepared to understand the meaning of the fission atom. A concerted effort, first by the global scientific community, then by the U.S. Office of Censorship, had led to a suppression of information around the topic in the hopes to prevent abuses. This unresolved relationship with nuclear knowledge empowered the fictions about it. What would this new world, a world of limitless energy, mean? Juxtapose the hope in scientific possibility with the doom of nuclear apocalypse, and you get the gist of Jack Kirby's life. But is that what the Krackle is? Maybe we need to break it down a little further. If we just look at the Krackle, how much of the image is still there? What exactly do we lose? And the opposite, if we take it away, what changes? Is it any less galactic? Any flatter? Is it any less evocative? Any more or less nuclear? Or is it just not the same image? Take the rest away, and we could argue to have the same general composition of the panel. Maybe that's also true without the Krackle in it. The truth is that we only have the panels to tell us about the fictional world a comic book creates. Comic books, like all products of design, rely on our expectation. They teach us how to learn them. They also are complicit in creating those expectations in the first place. It's difficult to negotiate the behavior of each of these individual traces in any given panel. It's just not how comics work. But why did the Krackle take the shape it did? In 1962, Martin Schmidt captured the public's imagination with the first images of a quasar. A quasar is an extremely luminous active galactic nucleus powered by a supermassive black hole with mass ranging from millions to tens of billions of solar masses surrounded by a gaseous accretion disk. That's a very complicated idea stacked on a more complicated idea. For most people, it's indiscernible from magic. The images that the scientist Martin Schmidt offers successfully fill in the gap in understanding with wondrous galactic pointillism. These images captured the public's imagination and perhaps Kirby's. So again, what is the Krackle? What does it describe? What power does it hold? Ultimately, I return to my oldest sense-making strategy. I picked up a brush and I retraced history to see what conclusions I could draw. Only to be back here looking at this image and asking, what is the Kirby Krackle? Thank you.
Way to go, Lucas. Way to go. Bring it in, bring it in. Okay, wait, you're standing where I was standing. I don't know. I just want it to be like it always has been. Wow, how do you feel?
About this, or I'm good. I don't know. Yeah, great.
You were kind of like working on this like in the green room like until the very last minute. Was that how you typically work?
Yeah. It's never too late to make it better.
Yeah, I mean, I'm literally coming up with my questions that I'm going to ask like seconds before I go up. So I also kind of thrive in that environment. And what you have an iPad? What were you reading off that?
In order to guarantee the opportunity to improve it at the last second, one may rely on technologies that adapt, unlike printed paper.
There we go. Boo, printed paper. We're coming for you. Well, that was a really incredible presentation. I learned a lot about comics through you. I feel like you kind of came into the program being like, everyone knows about comics, and then we kept being like, you actually have to like tell us about what comics are. Has it been hard for you to like figure out how to talk to us non-comic people?
I think it's been harder to wrap my head around why I cared and what the story was and how it related to anything that anyone would want to think about. Though mostly it was about me and the page and that relationship and sussing out how there was a way in and a way out. So no, it wasn't about you.
It wasn't about me?
Royal you, I don't know. The royal, yeah.
Well, I'm forever gonna remember the word Kirby or the phrase Kirby Krackle. It's been ingrained in my. It sounds like a cereal to me, but and it's made me hungry. Which reminds me, we have to kind of get moving. So thank you so much, Lucas. That was incredible. Give it up one more time for Lucas.